Hello, coaches. Welcome back to another episode of Coach Better Spotlight. Today, CLINT and I are chatting with the amazing Joellen Killion, author of Coaching Matters and so many other foundational books about instructional coaching. I can't name them all here. This spotlight focuses on how coaches can build a successful coaching program in 8 steps. If your program is in need of refinement or you're starting from scratch, this episode has everything you need to get started. In the full-length podcast, we also chat about defining your role as a coach, understanding coaching heavy versus coaching light, working with your school leaders, and measuring your impact as a coach. This episode is truly a masterclass in instructional coaching. You do not want to miss it. Subscribe to Coach Better wherever you get your podcasts. Today's conversation is a great window into the learning that happens inside the Coach Certificate Mentorship Program, because there are so many aspects of Joellen's work that we use inside the program. Wherever you are in building a coaching culture in your school, the coach will give you the strategy, skills, and tools you need to make coaching a success. This academic year-long course and mentorship program will empower you to confidently apply instructional coaching strategies in any situation, from building a coaching program, to having coaching conversations, to being a leader in your school community. Registration for our next global cohort opens on the 21st of February and closes on the 14th of March. Find out more and join the waiting list at edurolearning.com/coach. All right, welcome back to another episode of Coach Better. CLINT and I are so excited to be here with one of our longtime heroes, Joellen Killion. We both have been referencing her work for I feel like well over a decade. I'm not sure when your actual first book was written, but I know I've been referencing your work for a very long time. And I'm so excited to chat with you and dig a little bit deeper into some of the ideas that we have been talking about on this podcast, in our respective blogs, in our coaching communities for many years. So Joellen, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's just an honor to be with you both.
Oh, thank you very much. You have done so much in the span of your career that I don't even want to try to summarize it all into one little thing right now. Can we start off by you telling us a little bit about how your work has evolved over time and give us a little bit of a background as to kind of where you started and where your thinking is at now? And then we'll dig deeper into some of those big questions that CLINT and I have for you.
You know, you just asked me a really big question, Kim. Where I started and where my thinking is now could be 5 years worth of conversation that we might have. But like so many coaches, I began as a teacher. I did have the gift, the opportunity to be involved in administrative work for a while. I started at the high school. I then moved to central office and was very involved in curriculum development, curriculum writing, managing the K-12 language arts program. And then my work transitioned from curriculum more toward what we then called the staff development, or today the professional learning arena. And I spent a good deal of my time focusing on principal development because they were so often neglected. And that just kind of evolved into continuing the need to emphasize high quality instruction, supporting teachers. That was just always a principal's main concern. How do I support teachers? And so the work of coaching evolved out of that. How do we help teachers be the best they can be every day? And so that's the short story of how I got to be where I am today. I left my public school education role and moved to work for the nonprofit organization the National Staff Development Council, now Today Learning Forward. And I was there for a pretty substantial time, I think 11 years, and retired from that association as their deputy executive director, and now continue a close relationship with them and also doing work with other school systems around the globe.
You have worked with so many teams, so many schools, so many individuals all around the world. Are there any common elements? And I think you've already addressed some of these in the previous two questions, but maybe we can not tighten them, but summarize them in this one question. What are some things that really make coaching work well, especially if you're at the beginning of building a coaching program? What are these things you really need to think about and put in place so that you can not only have measurable impact, but teachers are feeling supported and coaches are feeling like they're doing a good job?
You know, I'm glad you asked, and I really wish people who started coaching programs would take note of some of these really critical things. In the book Coaching Matters that I've done with some of my colleagues, Chris Bryan and Heather Clifton, we outline the critical questions that need to be answered before coaching begins. And I bet you can guess what the first one is. What's your purpose? What's your goal? What do you hope to have happen? We also ask people to define coaching. What do they mean by that? I can't tell you how many school systems I walk into, and if I ask a coach what coaching is, and I ask a principal, and I ask the coach supervisor at central office, I get 3 different answers. So it's really important to define what people mean by coaching. And that's not an easy task. And then we need to think about things such as how will we hire coaches? How will we support them and develop them? There's the deployment question, which is huge. How do we decide what coaches do? So that led to the 10 roles of coaching, which I know you're familiar with, really saying here is a catalog of 10 distinctly different ways coaches can support teachers. But I don't want any one coach to be doing all 10. I want them, based on the purpose and goal, to narrow that list to those that are high leverage supports. That work happens way before coaches start going to work. And I've added a new one into that list in the last few years, which is first, let's train the principals. Principals need to understand the purpose, the roles, how coaching is going to work, their role in supporting coaches, and their role in setting the expectation for their staff in working with coaches. If those aren't in place, there's no point in putting a coach in a school. So all of that is critical. I think scheduling coaches, where coaches work, how they work is critical. That's a big issue. There's all the work that Steve Barclay's done around the culture of coaching. What's missing in a school? What are the conditions that are present in a school and what needs tuning up to have coaching be effective? And who's responsible for doing that work? Questions about evaluating coaches and evaluating coaching need to be answered. And so there are a number of questions that need answering before coaches step in to doing that work. And I think I named some of the most important ones for you right there.
I love that you brought in the piece about training the principals. And this is, I feel like most of the coaches that I work with, and CLINT knows a lot of the same people, and they've been in these calls, there are coaching positions in schools. The beginning work that you described about the purpose and the goal and the definition and the deployment hasn't always happened, or if it has, it's been a bit like ad hoc and almost, especially in international school context, oh, if such and such international school does this thing, therefore we should have it because we need to be on par with this other international school. So like it's a tangential kind of conversation. And then you get this situation where the coach is reporting to this principal. All that above thinking hasn't necessarily happened. The coach is hired for a position that has maybe been clearly defined because it's been, adapted from somewhere else, but there's none of that like common understanding. And then the coach, and this is where I'm always working with coaches. How do we help your principal understand what is the vision and purpose of your role? How do we first get a better understanding of what they think coaching is? And then how do we work with them to construct the understanding for what we need as a school? And I'm so glad you added that in, because I think that we were talking about walls earlier. That's the wall that a lot of coaches are up against, because we've been hired for this position, but actually the understanding, there's a barrier there.
It's a simple matter of recognizing that for many coaches, once they're hired, when those pieces are missing, their work becomes so diffused. They do whatever needs to be done, mostly because they are contributors, they're collaborators, they see things that need attention. They're always willing. They say yes to everything. And pretty soon, before you know it, you can see a coach doing zero coaching and 80% secretarial support or some other kind of support that could easily be done by someone who is not in that role. And the other portion is in a mini administrator role, because these are capable hands. These are skillful, willing people who are willing to take on this task force and that committee and go here and substitute there. And before you know it, the resource of coaching is lost, yet the investment in coaching is still present without any opportunity for the benefit to occur.
That's going on a quote card right there, because that is like, that's it. And I think, I don't know if there is, and this is going to be long-winded, and I'm going to try to say it as short as possible. I don't know if there's an advantage to being in a larger school system, like in the US, where you'd be a district and you really have to do some of this work because it's so few people to support so many people, right? Like the coaching to teacher ratio in a school district in the US is often, is it higher than what you'd see in an international school, because international schools are so much smaller, right? Like you might have 3 or 4 or 5 coaches in an international school with 1,000 kids and the same number of coaches in a district with 12,000 kids, right? So maybe if the organization is larger, you have to do some more of that solid groundwork before you can apply a program, because you know it's going to be so spread. But that concept of the resource of coaching being lost and the investment is still present without seeing the benefit, that's like that kind of like hammer statement you have to make to school leaders. You don't want this to happen, but this is going to happen unless you do this other work first.
Right. And, I think there are school systems in the US that are incredibly fortunate. I work with one school system now where there are 3 coaches in every school. And I mean, it is incredible, the opportunity. And fortunately, this district has its act together, but other districts have the same kind of resource. And you might have 2 or 3 coaches in a school, and they spend less than 50% of their time doing anything that we would call coaching. And that is just sad.
I think it goes back to those essential conditions, right, that you mentioned earlier. And schools, even within the same district, are such variable cultures and have so much variation. And I would say even international schools where you have 3 schools on one campus, we're a middle and elementary and a high school. Mm-hmm. We could even be in the same building and those cultures are so different. Right. So they will be successful in one location and not as successful in another. And it could be just this tiny variation. And so I think that the flexibility of the culture or of the program to be adaptable to what is put in front of you, but still keeping those high level questions in the back of your mind, because that's what's guiding you. But how we're going to get there is always a little bit different. I think that's why these conversations are so valuable, because people get to see and hear how different schools and how different districts and how different administrators and different teachers and different coaches have put these really the same principles into practice. So many different combinations and permutations, and they can all be successful, but it's really dependent on where you're starting, right? Because we all want to go to that same place of improved student learning.
Exactly. We talk about the role, my co-authors and I in Coaching Matters talk about the role of a coach champion. And the coach champion is the person in this system whose responsibility it is to make sure that what you've said coaching is and what its purpose is in fact enacted. Who holds that, holds whatever it is to make sure that coaches are not doing things that are off focus, unless there's, emergencies. Of course, we know those things are going to happen. But for the most part, they're the ones who help coaches say no. They intervene when the principal oversteps or forgets or is, can't really think creatively because they're in a real bind. And who do they turn to? The coach, of course. So let's problem solve some other options. Let's think through that. And it's the coach champion who holds the torch for the fidelity of coaching to everything that we've said we want it to be, and that we are going to ensure that exists in our schools. And that person can be in international schools, it's very often the director of teaching and learning. In school systems in the US, it may be somebody in the curriculum office or an assistant superintendent who has that responsibility, who really keeps it together.
Thank you so much for watching today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you are ready to develop your coaching practice over the next academic year, please join us for the next cohort of The Coach. Wherever you are in building a coaching culture in your school, the coach will give you the strategies, skills, and tools that you need to make coaching a success. This academic year-long online course and mentorship program will empower you to confidently apply instructional coaching strategies in any situation, from building a coaching program to having a coaching conversation to being a leader in your school community. Registration for our next global cohort opens on the 21st of February and closes on the 14th of March. We facilitate only one cohort each year so we can offer individualized support for each participant. Now is your chance to be part of a global cohort of passionate and engaged learners, to leverage 40 weeks of in-depth coaching content with practical challenges to build your coaching skills, and to reflect on your practice for the entire academic year with a mentor. Become a certified Eduro Learning instructional coach today. Head over to edurolearning.com/coach to find out more. Here at Eduro, we provide customized online professional learning for educators at the intersection of technology, coaching, and leadership. Our mission is to empower the relentless learner in you to embrace your inner leader and make a bigger impact in your school setting. Join our Coach Better Facebook group and connect with us on social media at Eduro Learning for more great resources at the intersection of technology, coaching, and leadership. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode, and we'll see you next time.